Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired Justice of the New York State Supreme Court. This is a story about the meaning of life and how I learned the meaning of life. It goes back to September of 1967. I had just been bounced out of law school, and the Vietnam War was raging, and I needed a job. I wanted to get back into law school, and I wanted to focus my efforts on doing that, but I wanted to stay drafted further. I had no desire. I was a political science student. I had no desire to participate in the Vietnam War, which I thought was total garbage. It didn't make any sense at all, and I felt sorry for the poor guys that were involved in it. I saw it going nowhere from the very beginning, and my own thoughts was when Henry Kissinger and Nixon's kids or any of them go, then I'll go. It wasn't unpatriotic. I just didn't think the war was worth anything. Well, the job I took was as a middle school teacher, a history teacher. I had a history license in IS, Intermediate School 38, on St. Anne's Avenue in the South Bronx. And at that time, it was draft deferred. The reason was they couldn't get anybody to teach up there. The neighborhood was a hotbed of violence and chaos. This is the period when the Bronx started to burn. You know, the guys in the Bronx would set fire to vacant buildings, and then when the firemen came, make sport of raining down bricks and any debris they could find from a neighboring rooftop on the firemen, and to the point where the firemen had to be accustomed to putting canopies over the rear of the fire truck so that they could have cover from what was falling out or was thrown from above. And at that particular time, the school was located in the 41st Precinct, the 41st Precinct of the New York City Police Department, which became, during those years in 1967, 1970, when I was there, Fort Apache. And what brought that about, it was an ironic name given the place by the cops because in one particular instance, there was a rumor that flew around the neighborhood about police brutality. Turns out, in retrospect, it was a false rumor, but it doesn't make any difference. People believed it and were so irate, the locals were so irate, that they surrounded the police precinct, and guns were easy to find in the South Bronx. Everybody had guns. The neighborhood was split between about 60% Puerto Rican and 40% African American. It was constant tension. It wasn't like Harlem where there was Spanish Harlem and Black Harlem and they were separated. Here they were building to building, and there was no love lost between the two groups of people. And there was constant conflict. And the locals had attacked the police precinct and laid siege to it with guns. And the cops were firing back from the precinct. And from that day forward, it became known as Fort Apache. It was like the cowboy movies. And that's the way I went there. And as I say, it was draft deferred because it was a violent place. It was a special service school, which meant that all the students, there were 1,200 students in the school, and they qualified for free lunch. It was abject poverty up there. It was a tough place to be. It was so tough that you couldn't even play the numbers. Nobody would carry the money, would take bets on the gangsters' lottery because they wouldn't. They were afraid of getting mugged on the streets. It was a bad place. And the story was in Vietnam. They used to brag. The military used to brag that if any soldier or Marine or anyone was hit, airman, was wounded, they would have them in a field hospital being taken care of and ministered to within 7 minutes. Well, in IS 38, you could lay there for 7 days bleeding in some parts of the school or shot, and you could bleed out and nobody would even find you for a week or two. It was a rough place. I was supposed to be a history teacher. I was licensed to be a history teacher, and we showed up for the job, preceding the students showing up by about 2 or 3 days to take care of administrative things like scheduling and room assignments, etc. And during that time, I was called down to the principal's office, and he asked me if I was interested in being a phys ed teacher. I said, well, I don't have a license to teach phys ed. I said, as a matter of fact, at Flushing High School, when I went to high school, phys ed was a waste of time, and I used to cut For 3 years, I cut those classes. I never even attended those classes. I used to go to Horn and Hardest or the YMCA and eat or go anywhere rather than go to the gym class because it was a waste of time. He said, no, he says, in this school, it's not a waste of time. He said, the kids love it. All the teachers are fully licensed phys ed teachers, and they have a very robust, he says, it's actually the best program in the school and the best department in the school. The kids never miss school. They love it. It's highly organized, and you'll be in good hands, and they'll show you what to do. And they'll be there to help you and guide you through the thing. And if you want to try, and I asked, I said, well, do I have to wear a suit? They said, no, you wear chinos and a polo shirt and sneakers. You don't have to wear a tie at all. You're a phys ed teacher. I said, that seals it. Okay, I'll take a chance at being a phys ed teacher. They said, good. We think you'll be all right. You have a background in boxing, amateur boxing, and you coach Pop Warner football, so you should be a good fit with the department, and they'll take care of you, and I'm sure they'll be happy to have you. Well, I embarked on my career, and as a phys ed teacher, wearing my gym teacher's uniform, and the first day of school, when the students were present, I took a shortcut to the gymnasium after my official homeroom class, and I walked through the student cafeteria in my polo shirt and chinos and sneakers. And as I walked through the student cafeteria, a woman, one of the teachers, puts a hand on my shoulder and stops me and said, "Are you in 7-1? Take a seat over there and be quiet until I come and talk to you." And I said, "Madam, unhand my shoulder. I am your colleague." And she looked at me, said, "Oh my gosh," she started blubbering. I'm so sorry. And she introduced herself. I introduced myself. And the point was, I looked like one of the kids in that school because even though it was only up to 8th grade, the kids were up to 16 years old. They had been left back. They had been on the streets. They'd been in the youth house, all sorts of horror stories. And the kids were old and they were mature kids and they grew up fast on the streets. Even the girls, some of them were married. This is in an intermediate school in the 8th grade. I had kids coming in that were married. It was a terrible situation up there. Anyway, the Board of Ed then and now would have a salary increment if you had 30 credits or a master's degree, or 30 credits over your bachelor's degree. And they had another doctoral increment if you had 60 credits or a doctor's degree over your you had 60 credits over your bachelor's degree. I had 22 credits over, and I wanted to get the increment because it was significant. And I'm talking to my friends in the lounge, and my friends were mostly Jewish guys because the culture in the Board of Education at that time was mostly Jewish teachers. Just like the police department, the culture was Irish dominated, and in the sanitation department, it was Italian dominated, and in the corrections department, it was African American dominated. Well, the teachers in New York in those days were mostly Jewish, and all my friends can remember Joel Silverman, Murray Bloom, Jerry Lindner, and Abe Levy, who was a member of the Haganah. He fought the British in Palestine as a member of the Haganah, which is a guerrilla outfit, fought colonialism on behalf of the Zionists. They said, listen, if you need extra credits, we go for extra credits. Why don't you come with us? We go to Hebrew Union College. I had never heard of it before. I said, Hebrew Union College? Yeah. They said, it's very convenient. It's on West 67th Street near Central Park West, and it's very reasonable. The tuition is not as expensive as some of the other places. The credits are recognized by the Board of Ed. We all go. It's a small place. Everybody gets good marks. You just show up and you do your job, and you'll find it to be a very, very friendly and nice place to earn your credits. And and on top of it, you'll be with us. We're going, and then why not come with us? So they won me over, and I enrolled at Hebrew Union College. And Hebrew Union College, as it turned out, was the academic center of Reformed Judaism in America. There's the Reformed, the Conservative, and Orthodox Judaism. There's three big main divisions in this country. And I enrolled in 3 classes. They used to train rabbis here at Hebrew Union College, and they also had a school of sacred music where they trained cantors for all the synagogues around the country. And the dean of the school was Rabbi Robert Whittam. And Rabbi Whittam was a very tall, distinguished-looking guy, handsome fellow, who wore very well-tailored but conservative suits, and he had a Van Dyke, a neatly trimmed Van Dyke, and he spoke in a stentorian British accented voice, like right out of BBC radio, it sounded like. And he was a wonderful teacher. I had enrolled over the course of 1 year in 3 different courses. One was Psalms, studying the book of Psalms. The other one was medieval Jewish history, talking about Maimonides and Jewish medieval philosophy in Spain before they were expelled by King Philip and Queen Isabella and the Inquisition. And the last course was about the Bible. And all of these courses, because it was a small school, it turns out I had the same teacher, and that was Rabbi Whittam, who was the dean of the school. And that was my lucky break, because Rabbi Whittam was a phenomenal teacher. I was used to Catholic education, which was mostly top down. You went to class, and the nuns, the priests, the brothers, whoever it was, the professors, they would talk, and you would take notes. You wouldn't ask questions. You wouldn't do anything. It was all pretty didactic. This is what would telling you, take it down, remember it, and study it for the test. Rabbi Whittam was different sort of teacher. He was more of the Socratic method. He was like a moderator in the class. He would ask questions and put questions to the class and start a discussion. And everybody would talk about things. And the wind-up is, at the end of the semester, whatever the subject matter, you came away with a very, very solid grasp of the fundamentals that were being taught. It was really, really gratifying. And it was a pleasant way to learn and discuss things. Of course, we were all grown-ups and adults, so there were no discipline problems or anything like that. And it worked very, very well. But it was very enjoyable. And all my friends had steered me in the right direction. And I was lucky to have Rabbi Whittam. And one incident I remember was with the Psalms class. At the end of the class, the second to the last class of the semester, it was once a week in the evening. And he said, well, next week, he said, over my vote, I have to I have to give you a final exam. He said, the board of directors, I voted against final exams. We don't need one here in this class. Everybody here, it's a small class. I think we were less than 10 people. He said, you've all participated. I'm very satisfied with everybody's participation and everybody's effort. You all deserve, and you've all earned a good mark as far as I'm concerned, a very good mark. He said, but I have to give a final exam in keeping with the vote of the board of directors. But fear not, because at the end of tonight's lecture, you'll know what to study for the final exam. And he launched into the lecture for that evening, and then the discussion. He was talking about 2 Psalms which were gone over for and emphasized for their poetic content, and 2 more Psalms that were also duly emphasized for their historic content, and another 2 Psalms which were emphasized because of their spiritual content. And he explained each and every one of them, and at the end of the class, he said, okay, I'll see you all in the next class. The final exam is next week, and good luck to everyone. Any questions? And this one woman in the class raises her hand. And he said, yes. And she said, Rabbi, you said we would know what to study at the end of this exam for the final. And there was a long pause, and he looked at her with a look of consternation. I just looked at her, and it seemed like an interminable pause. It wasn't interminable. It just seemed that way. And finally he spoke, and he said to her, and I'll never forget her name, Miss Appel, in the battle for knowledge, you are a pacifist. And he picked up his notes and he walked out the door, and he left her to the rest of the class to explain that she had already gotten the 6 Psalms that she had supposed to study. And we explained it to her. It was a pretty memorable experience. But the next semester I had a class, about the Bible, about how the Bible was put together, which is very interesting, because Jews are known to themselves and to others who know them well as the people of the book. And that's because they, from biblical times, have put all their spiritual knowledge and a lot of intellectual knowledge in books. And that has served them well culturally over the years, over 2,000 years. That has preserved their culture from country to country throughout the diaspora. Wherever they went, they knew their culture because they carried books with them, and their culture went with them. It was portable. And they respect books, and they respect book learnings. And as a result, because they respect books and they respect education, Jews, who are a very small percentage of the world's population, punch way above their weight intellectually, and have distinguished themselves intellectually in so many fields because they have always grown up, again, with high regard, and they are the people of the book, and they live it. Well, now we're studying the first book of Judaism, pretty much, which is the Bible. And in Catholic school, you learn the Bible to some extent, but it's mostly New Testament. It's the life of Christ on. They brush over the Old Testament. They don't teach too much of the Old Testament. You know about it. They talk about it. But this was about the New Testament. And interestingly enough, this is about the Old Testament, rather. And interestingly enough, you find out that it was put together by Jews of that time, 2,000 some odd years ago. And there were religious people, there were academic people, non-religious, and there were people from ordinary walks of life that debated what to include in what would become the Bible. God didn't hand the Bible down, bound and published, and say, here, this is the Bible, and this is my inspired word. People argued about what books go in it. There's the book of Genesis, the book of Psalms, the book of Ecclesiastes, the book of Job. There's all sorts of books. And what went in and what went out was a subject of debate and argument among the people who created and put together, assembled what is now known as the Bible, the Old Testament. And one of the arguments which was explained in class was about the book of Ecclesiastes, the message of which is enjoy your life and enjoy every day to the fullest, because who knows what tomorrow will bring. Live for the present. That was the message. That was the meaning of life in Ecclesiastes. Now, some of the religious people who were debating the content of what they were putting together said, this is not the meaning of life, and we don't really want to include this in the Bible. And others said, yeah, but it's so popular, and it's if we don't include it, we'll be criticized. People will say, oh, you didn't include that book in the holy book because you were scared of what it really means. You should go and enjoy yourself. So they decided to play safe and include the book of Ecclesiastes. But they did it, according to Rabbi Whittam, because they knew there was another book they were going to include, which was the real meaning of life. And Rabbi Whittam said it was for him the meaning of life. And he said, for him, the meaning of life could be found, and for those others, could be found in the book of Job. And he said, Job will trump what Ecclesiastes teaches as the meaning of life. And the story of Job is pretty well known. Job was a good man, a regular man, who was visited by a string of tragedies, one after the other, one worse than the other. And every time he was faced with a tragedy, he would question, and what's the rationale? Why is this happening to me? And somebody would offer up a theory. In the first tragedy, somebody said, well, this is happening to you because the sins of the father are visited upon the son. And Job said, but my father was good, and why would God punish me? If my father wasn't good, why would he punish me for something my father did? I have nothing to do with that. But it doesn't make sense in any respect. And then the next tragedy, and Joel is saying, why me? And somebody says, well, God is you're suffering now because your reward is going to be greater. The more suffering you have now, the greater your reward is going to be in the afterlife. And Joel says, well, that's ridiculous. Is God a sadist? He has to punish me to reward me later? Why can't he, if he loves us and he made us, why can't he just reward us? So that was debunked in the book of Job. And then the next one, next tragedy that happened, it was terrible what was happening to him. And somebody said, well, God is testing you. And he wants to test your faith. And if you pass the test, then you'll have a reward in the afterlife, in the hereafter. And Job says, well, if God is testing me and he knows everything. He knows the outcome of the test. He knows how the test is going to turn out. This is ridiculous to test me. Why would God do that if he already knew what the outcome is going to be? Does he have nothing better to do? He said, I'm sure he does. Well, finally, the last tragedy that happens in the book of Job has him in a very, very serious state. He's totally desperate, and he's walking along the road, and in desperation, he looks up and he speaks to the heavens, and he says, "Why me? Why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening to me?" And the voice comes from up above and says, "Who are you to ask? I gave you a strong right arm. That's all you need." And Rabbi Whittam says that He says, it's not a perfect answer, but it's the closest thing I can come to a perfect answer in the Bible or anywhere in the Bible. And I believe, personally, he said, that that's the meaning of life. And that's how I get through life. And that was a real eye-opener for me. And from that day forward, I felt the same way, thanks to Rabbi Whittam. Wind-up is, Rabbi Whittam paid me a nice compliment at the end of the course. He offered me a job. He was the chief rabbi at Temple Emmanuel in Sands Point, a very affluent community on Long Island's North Shore on the Gold Coast. And he's still there, by the way, 40-some-odd years later. He's a brilliant guy. He was in charge of all the Reformed Jewish publications nationally. I think he still is, the newsletter and the magazine and all their publications. He's a brilliant guy. And he offered me a job teaching Sunday school in comparative religion. He said, Rudy, you've had a lot of religious instruction over the years in Catholic grammar school and a year of high school and then in college. He said, and you've had a lot of theology and philosophy courses. He said, you'd be perfect, and you're not Jewish. He said, and it would be good for those teenagers to hear about comparative religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and everything else from somebody who wasn't Jewish. He says, and I think you would do a good job with them. Do you want the job? He said, I'll see that you get it. I said, no, teaching in the South Bronx all week is enough for me. I said, I'm not looking for a Sunday job, doing more teaching, although I'm honored and flattered by your offer. And after all these years, I'm indebted. I'm in gratitude for Rabbi Whittam's teaching. And I had all of that Catholic education, and despite all, beside the point of all of that Catholic education, in the final analysis, I had to learn the meaning of life from a rabbi, and I did. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.